Yeet in.
Hi, she's back for another video. Today we're gonna be talking about all things Cambridge. So she's just going to be giving advice based on her experience throughout the whole process. So firstly, unlike other universities in UK, Cambridge doesn't use the LNET test. So instead they have their own Cambridge Law test, right? Yes. So what was the format of this test like? Can you explain to us?
The Cambridge Law test is a written test where you have to choose one topic to write about out of 3 other questions. It's usually an argumentative essay, but it might be a factual essay also. They just want to see how you can construct your arguments, and they want to see how well your critical thinking is. So an important note to keep in mind is that you do not need any prior legal knowledge when you do this test, or this goes for the interview as well. So what they want to test you on is your critical thinking, how well you construct your arguments. So it's very important for you before going into this test to really learn how to write a strong argumentative essay. It's not about your language per se, it's more about, how well you build and construct your arguments, and how well you can think from both perspectives, from both sides of an argument, and how well you can rebut the opposing side that you're opposed against. So these are the skills that you have to master before going to the Cambridge Law test, or even the LNET test, which requires you to write an essay as well. And I would say even for the Cambridge interview as well, because there will be a scenario-based questions where they will test you on your ability to think on the spot on how to solve a legal problem.
Do you have any advice on how to prepare properly for this written test? What's the most efficient way to prepare?
Definitely look up specimen papers online. Familiarize yourself with the kind of format or the kind of questions that they're going to ask you. Practice a few of the argumentative essays on the specimen test that you manage to find. Look up LNET specimen test essay as well. Those will be very helpful. Learn up about the common kinds of arguments that you can run in very common legal questions or even moral dilemma questions. Questions such as maybe euthanasia or limitations to freedom of speech, things like these. There are very common arguments that you can run. Common arguments don't mean that they are bad. You just have to take a common argument and build it in a structural and strong way, therefore showing that you have the ability to elaborate, to build on even the most commonest of arguments. Although some of the questions might not be argumentative, they might be factual, you should still try to give your points of for and against, because often there are always points for and against a certain issue. So show that you have a broad range of opinions, and most importantly, know where you stand. It's quite important, quite noisy. Okay, the dog stopped barking. Bork. Bork, 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 bork. And try not to stay on the fence. Have a side that you stand on. Therefore, you can show that you have the skills to firstly know a broad range of opinions for and against, but also have the skills to, choose the stronger side and oppose or rebut weaker perspectives from the opposing side. So that's an important skill to show a very good argumentative essay. Most importantly, practice how to make persuasive arguments. Persuasive arguments come from a lot of things. Firstly, they come from, the truth of the argument, and I would say the importance of the argument. Always focus on that.
So upon receiving the question, how much time did you have to write and submit the essay?
I think it was about an hour or maybe more than that. I don't really remember.
Okay. You take it at home, is it?
No, I took it at Sunway.
Sunway, yeah. Okay.
They will give you a location where you need to take the test.
So where did you take the interview?
I took the interview at Help University at KL. So the location of the interview and the Cambridge Law Test will be based around KL and at universities, so different locations, and they'll allocate students to these different locations each year, but it will be around KL and Selangor.
So for the interview, how did you prepare for it?
So for the interview, one thing that was very helpful was the mock interview my school gave me. They gave me 2 mock interviews in total, which helped me familiarize myself with how an interview should work. And from that mock interview, I had more to work on. I had more to study on, I had more to research on. But generally, it's just a lot of work on my own part, researching everything and anything about what I was interested in. Very importantly, look at your personal statement, go through your personal statement again, because the personal statement is very short, right? There will be a lot of things that you cannot include. So think about the questions that might arise from that. When you cannot fully elaborate on a thing in your personal statement, think of the questions that might arise from your personal statement from the interviewer. Research on everything that you said on your personal statement. This is very important. Imagine writing something about, constitutional rights on your personal statement and not being able to answer relatively simple question about constitutional rights when the interviewer asks. You do not want that to happen on your interview. It's almost,
A sabotage to your...
It's almost an immediate rejection if you can't even answer a very simple question about the area that you say you're interested in your own personal statement. So that's very bad. Something very helpful is if your college doesn't provide mock interviews, you can watch the demo interviews that you can find on YouTube. Cambridge and Oxford upload demo interviews where you can take a look at. But keep in mind that it might not be 100% similar. So in the demo interview, I've realized that they allocate more time for the scenario-based questions part, more on critical thinking. But for my interview that was conducted in Malaysia, the interviewer focused more on my personal statement and asking questions that wasn't fully elaborated in my personal statement. That doesn't mean that your personal statement is a bad personal statement. It just means that there is a word limit and there are certain things that you cannot include in a personal statement. And these things, if they are part of, the elaboration or part of the logical link in your personal statement, it will definitely be asked in the interview because the interviewer wants you to connect the dots for them. So sometimes they might ask even harder questions and go deeper into the topic. Don't be afraid. You definitely won't get penalized for not knowing something that you're not supposed to know, something that is insanely technical and hard, but you will get penalized for not knowing the basic stuff around the area that you're researching. There are people who ask me whether or not you need to study up on your A2 contract law and tort law for the scenario-based questions that will come up in the interview. You don't have to if you have not reached that point in your A-level studies yet, because they do not expect you to have any prior legal knowledge. In fact, if you do know any prior legal knowledge, like you purposely went and studied up in tort law for this specific interview, it might not be as good for you because they don't expect you to know anything and they just want to gauge your critical thinking, your logical arguments in the purest sense. So if you do have any legal knowledge, you need to act like you don't.
Oh, okay.
Because they don't expect that. So when technical terms start coming up, they will know that, you studied up for this. Some interviewers might not be as forgiving, but some interviewers might. And the moment they know that you studied up for this, they will expect your answers to be more thorough. That's very logical, right? Even if you do know a bit about tort law, contract law, and if a question comes up, give your answers in the purest, logical...
layman term kind of way.
Yeah. Don't go up there and give your answers in legal jargon and all. So give it in, logical argument form, A to B, B to C. This happened, why? Because of this. So this ought to happen, why is this justified? Go back to the basics so that they can really gauge with how you think and think out loud in your interview. Go through your thinking process verbally.
So I know that sometimes interviewers might ask something that you have totally no idea about, like you don't understand what they're asking about. So in those kind of situations, how did you cope?
So my advice for that would be that usually what they ask would be very hard. Just think about all the aspects in the question. So it could be a very broad question. So think about every aspect that is possible. Find something that you know more or less about, that you're at least a bit familiar about, and start from there. Start by saying, regarding this certain aspect of the question, I think that, and then give your opinion. And once you've done that, once you've done the first step and you seem like you're struggling, the interviewer will then help to guide you on. So if you're in the wrong direction, they'll direct you to the right direction. If you're in the right direction, they'll continue guiding you. Don't just go silent, but show that even when you're met with hard questions, you can still try to find the answer, that you still have the ability to think about it even when, it gets hard. But if in the very unfortunate circumstance that you cannot, your mind is completely blank, you cannot pick apart even one thing about the question that they're asking, it's not wrong to ask for some time to think. First of all, you can always say that, oh, this is a tough question, can I get, a minute to think about it? They'll definitely be kind and they'll say sure. And it's not a bad thing as well. Don't be intimidated by asking for more time. It's definitely better to ask for time and think about a better answer than to answer very abruptly and not think about your answer and the answer turns out very shit. In the unfortunate circumstance that your mind is completely blank and you don't have anything in mind, you cannot pick apart even one part of the question to answer, I would say that it is time to divert your answer. So this is a very, very, very bad strategy. So of course, diverting the question has to be the last resort when you really don't have anything to answer, because answering something is much better than saying, I don't know. Of course, they will know when you're diverting the question, and it's bad, but last resort things. Another way of diverting the question, if it's an argument which you can take sides and you're supposed to take a side, you can try to take a different side. So another important thing is that when they ask you questions, they might be trying to challenge your point of view in your personal statement or anywhere. So they might try to challenge your principle to see if you're consistent or not. Try to be consistent in your principle, but if in any situation where you realize that what they're saying makes a lot of sense, their questions make a lot of sense, then it might be an exception to your principle. And so don't be afraid to make exceptions to your principle and tell them why this exception is acceptable as a limitation of your principle. Because don't worry, that happens a lot in law, right? We have this general rule,
the rule of acceptance, and then the rule of postal rule as the exception of the general rule, and then the exception to the postal rule itself.
Yeah, there's like exceptions to exceptions to exceptions, so don't be worried. It's very hard for one single principle, unless it's a fundamental one. It's very hard for one single principle to, work for everything, every single thing in the whole wide world. It doesn't work like that. So there will be exceptions, so don't be afraid to, when they challenge your principle, to accept and acknowledge that, oh, this might be an exception. You don't have the prior legal knowledge for that, but you can tell them why you think this is an exception, logically, right? Why is this justified? It is raining.
Oh, that's sudden.
Whoa!
Yeah. In general, what do you think interviewers are like? Are they like super intimidating and force you into a corner sometimes?
I am lucky enough to have met kind interviewers for all of my interviews. Every single one of them were kind, they were nice, they engaged in polite ways, and they did not, they weren't intimidating at all. But I've heard from stories that you might meet intimidating interviewers.
What would they do?
They would be very strict, they would pick apart what you're saying, and they would be very critical about it. They won't smile. So
don't be that.
Don't be intimidated by that. So essentially how they judge your performance is the same for kind interviewers and for not so kind interviewers. So yeah, the standard of judgment is the same. It's just that the way that they present or they conduct an interview is different. If their standard of judgment is the same, what you cannot do is waver your level of performance. Your level of performance must be the same for every single interviewer, no matter how they conduct their interviews, correct? Because their standard of judgment is the same. Don't be affected by intimidating interviewers. And don't let your guard down on kind interviewers. Always be polite, smile, make sure your appearance looks nice, and just be the way you would be with a standard interviewer. And don't feel personally attacked. Don't get affected and don't feel personally attacked by intimidating interviewers. And please, definitely do not appear defensive, right? If they criticize something, thoroughly think about it. Is it justified that they're criticizing what you're saying? Is it true? If it's not true, politely reply them about why it's not true. Give them reasons. Always go with reasoning logic. If what they say makes sense, be prepared to admit, I wouldn't say mistakes, but be prepared to admit why, and also give reasons. Always give reasons. So even if what you're agreeing to might be opposing your point of view, if you give reasons, it still seems like you're doing the thinking here and you're doing the work here. So that's very important for them to see. But most importantly, don't attack the interviewers. Please don't do that.
That's super stupid.
Please don't do that. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. It's stupid, but you will be surprised by how many people
really they get triggered.
Get triggered. Don't get triggered, man. And try not to tell lies, because these are very experienced and seasoned interviewers. They can tell when you're lying.
Seasoned.
They can't tell when you're telling an outright lie, and they might be able to tell when you're sprinkling lies on the truth. They might be able to tell that too. So try to be truthful, try to be honest. I don't think passion, unless you're a very good, remarkable actor, I don't think passion can be faked. So try not to lie about that too.
Ding dong dong.
Hello!
Ding dong. Hola. So after you've done your interview with Cambridge, how long did it take for them to reply you?
I did my interview in October and they replied me in January. So it took about a few months for them to reply.
Right, they replied through email, right?
Yes.
So we come to the main point of this video where we ask for your advice on writing personal statements. So firstly, I want to ask, how many personal statements have you written?
I wrote a lot of personal statements. I think maybe under 5 personal statements. Some are good and some are bad, but I've had my fair share of personal statement experience.
So what are your advice?
I think to start your personal statement is very hard. I can only speak for law personal statements, unfortunately, because that's what I'm most experienced at. For your law personal statement, you have to show why you're interested in the course, why you're passionate about it, what have you done to make you suited for the law course, and any other extracurriculars that you have done that relates to the course or relates to what they require in a law student. About interest and passion, it can come from anywhere. Really ask yourself what made you interested in law in the first place. Is it a specific event? Is it something that happened to you, or is it just general observations in everyday world, or what is the initial thing that pushed you to want to study law? Most people struggle with this, which is what have you done to make you suited for the law course? I think what they want to see, what university admissions want to see, is that you put in some extra effort to show that you're actually interested intellectually and academically about the law. Because because if your end goal is to become a lawyer, there are a lot of ways you can achieve this. In the UK, the admissions particularly look at your situation in context of the UK universities education system. What makes you different from the students who first go to economics or other subjects and then taking a GDL program, which is a one-year conversion course for you to become a lawyer. There are people like that, and what makes you want to study law 3 years academically as compared to those people who also have the same end goal as you? They want to help people, they also want to become lawyers. So what makes you different from an academical perspective? Why are you academically interested in the law? And this is where the technical part comes in, right? You can discuss any technical things that you find interesting in the law, but most importantly, do not only write observations, do not take quotes from articles that you have read, but really put your own thoughts into it, right? Have your own evaluations and make sure that the evaluations aren't premature. Make sure that they are strong arguments that you come up with yourself, or you've read some other different perspectives and viewpoints about what the issue is and how it should be solved, and coming up with your own conclusion, adding your own evaluations to that. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, you should have your own evaluations, but do not assume things, and do not, make evaluations or conclusions out of thin air, but really research the topic and go into it, do your own exploration before you come to a conclusion, and write that journey in your personal statement in a concise way.
So what do you think about quoting books in your personal statement?
I think that quoting books is a good way to show that you have done your research into the law. But personally, there's a small hack that you can do. Remember when I said you have to come up with your own evaluations and conclusions about things, maybe your own solutions? Sometimes the solution that you come up with, you might think, is this valid? Is it flawed? Is it premature? And that's when quoting books or reading articles come into mind. So don't start with a book that you have to quote, but go have an idea first and find a book that supports your idea so that you can show that as evidence. But quoting books is a form of having evidence, showing that you have done your research, but it's not a must. I know a lot of samples that you've read, they might have quoted some books, but if you can't find any books to justify yourself, then it's all right. If you can't find books that have gave you insight on your personal statement topic, then it's okay. As long as you do find evidence from resources, then it's fine. It could come from something that the judge have said. It could come from an article. Anything is fine, really, and it's not a must that you have to quote books. Definitely don't over quote books, one or two books is fine. Oh, and you might have read some really impressive personal statements whereby maybe the person interned for the Attorney General's office or something. Do not worry if you don't have that kind of experience. Don't worry about having less exposure or less experience. It's about how you frame your exposures and your experiences into ways that help you show that you're a suitable candidate for their university. So even if your experience isn't as impressive or your achievements aren't as impressive as the people out there, it's just a way of framing. As long as you derive some benefit from your co-cues or you derive some benefit from your experiences, just state that, have good writing, and it's going to be fine. There are a lot of articles about Oxbridge that I've read, and in interviews and personal statements alike, they do generally care less about your extracurriculars and more about your ability, your intellectual capabilities, and your ability to hold an argument when pressured. So have that kind of mentality when writing your personal statement as well, right? This is your stand. I think that human rights are abused in Malaysia. This is my stand. How is it abused? How do we make it better? Why some form of control is necessary, even if we do want to live in a free society? Things like that. Try to look at things from different perspectives so that you show that you read all the viewpoints, not necessarily just blindly following your own beliefs. Your personal statement has a 4,000 character including spaces word limit, so be sure to focus on one or two issues instead of multiple issues, although I'm sure that you're passionate about a lot of issues happening, but there just simply isn't enough space for you to go in depth. It's better to have in-depth discussions about one or two issues than not so in-depth discussions about many, many issues.
So thank you, Yinsing, for refilming the third time of this part for me. Yay! Applaud. Okay. Okay, very good, very nice. Thank you for watching. This marks the end of the series. Thanks, Yinsing, again for making this happen. And yeah, so maybe you'll see her on my channel again the next time, and she'll already be a Cambridge student. Oh. Say bye, Cambridge student.
Bye.